Russia began to use one of the best electronic warfare systems in the world, Lear-3, against the armed forces of Ukraine. After the Russian Lear-3 electronic warfare systems successfully coped with the tasks of defeating terrorists in Kazakhstan, the Russian military deployed these weapons on the border with Ukraine. The key feature of these complexes is the ability to intercept data on the location of the military and mercenaries, which allows you to take appropriate measures and actions against the enemy, which is especially important against the background of the impending attacks of the armed forces of Ukraine on the positions of the LPR and DPR militia. At the moment, it is known that a whole battalion of electronic warfare is deployed in the Belgorod region, which includes Russian Lear-3 systems, which makes it possible to constantly monitor the movement of the Ukrainian military, NATO forces, and foreign mercenaries that are already deployed in Donbass. At present, the Russian side only monitors the situation in the region. However, in the event of aggressive and provocative behavior of the armed forces of Ukraine, it will be ready to use its non-lethal weapons to protect Russian citizens in the DPR and LPR. According to experts, the capabilities of the Russian Lear-3 complexes will be more than enough to identify all directions of the offensive of the armed forces of Ukraine and provide the DPR and LPR with this data. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg ordered the deployment of a large number of NATO forces in two directions of the Russian border. According to the data voiced by the press service of the North Atlantic Alliance, the deployment of additional units in the Baltic Sea and the Baltic countries, as well as in the Black Sea, has begun, which probably involves sending a large number of warships and combat aircraft to the region. It is known that during an emergency NATO press conference held a few hours ago, Jens Stoltenberg announced that additional NATO forces would be sent to the Black Sea and Baltic regions. The exact number of the NATO Secretary-General was not announced. However, we are probably talking about at least 10,000 people, which is already quite a serious threat. At the moment, it remains unknown whether the US authorities will send their troops in these directions. However, if this happens, the number of NATO troops here may increase several times. It is noteworthy that despite the refusal of a number of countries to participate in any escalation against Russia, all NATO representatives confirmed their readiness to transfer their troops to the Russian western and southern sections of the border. In turn, huge trainloads of American military equipment have already been seen in Poland and Romania, while 3 NATO warships have advanced towards the Black Sea, 2 Spanish warships, and 1 US Navy missile destroyer. On the other hand, despite the fact that London announced that only 30 of its military specialists were sent to Ukraine to train the Ukrainian military in the use of NLAW systems, it became known that the number of British military personnel was underestimated by 5 times. To date, at least 150 British special forces are in the Donbass, namely, just 60 kilometers northwest of Donetsk. As follows from the data of the media resources of the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, at the moment it is known that a group of 150 British Special Forces is located in Kramatorsk and its suburbs. The appearance of the British military here is of serious concern, since earlier there was information that during the training of the military personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine it is planned to conduct practical firing, probably including on the territories of the self-proclaimed republics. To date, the armed forces of Ukraine can be armed with over 20 anti-tank systems of various types. At the same time, less than a day ago, another American aircraft arrived at the Boryspil airport, which delivered about 300 Javelin anti-tank missile systems to the armed forces of Ukraine. Joe Biden has warned Russian President Vladimir Putin of enormous consequences if he invades Ukraine. Amid ongoing fears of the developing situation in Ukraine, in a stark warning, President Biden said that it would be the largest invasion since World War II. The US president has said he would consider personal sanctions against Russian President Vladimir Putin if he continues to escalate the situation. Around 130,000 Russian troops and military hardware are believed to be poised on the Belarus border, while 8,500 NATO troops wait on standby. Biden claims that every NATO ally is on the same page, and that every member of NATO would come to Ukraine's defense if Russia decides to invade. He said the decision on whether to deploy the troops into Eastern Europe would depend on what Putin does or doesn't do. The US president assured that having the troops on standby is not provocative but a reassurance to Ukraine that they are there to help should Putin invade. However, the NATO troops would not be sent into the country if Russia was to invade, he confirmed. He said, "We have no intention of putting American forces and air forces in Ukraine, but, as I said, there are going to be serious economic consequences if Putin moves." Joe Biden told reporters last night that Russia invading Ukraine would change the world, and warned President Putin of not just economic and political consequences, but worldwide consequences if he was to invade the former Soviet Republic. British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss warned today that a Russian invasion would have huge consequences for Europe, and should allies not act, it could give rise to other aggressive regimes around the world. In an interview with BBC Radio 4 today, Truss said, "We are seeing a threat to a free democracy in Europe from an aggressive regime. Of course, that would have huge implications for Europe if Putin was to stage an invasion, but it would also have huge implications for aggressive regimes around the world." Britain has previously supplied Ukraine with arms to help bolster the country's defense if an attack by Russia happens. As well as this, NATO troops stand on high alert as allies of Ukraine. Germany, however, is believed to have declined to provide arms to Ukraine, which has annoyed some allies and raised questions about Germany's resolve in standing up to Russia. Concerns mount about the impact of Nord Stream 2, a natural gas pipeline that runs from Russia to Germany, and the grip it has over the country. The decision has angered Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who said that Germany's decision not to send arms does not correspond to the level of our relations and the current security situation. It comes after Foreign Secretary Liz Truss announced that the UK is trying to wean Europe and Ukraine off Russian gas.